Well, let's turn our attention now to strategy and competitive advantage. In particular, we care about how technology can help with those, but we also have to learn what those things mean. So let's take a look. So how are organizational strategy and industry structure related? So the industry that you find yourself in, is that going to impact your strategy? Probably so. What's the relationship between innovation and information technology? We'll look at that as well. How do information systems provide competitive advantage? So how do we get a leg up on our competition? All right. And then finally, how do we keep it going? Why doesn't our competition just copy what we did if it was so good? So how do we keep it going and keep getting value out of it over time? Well, we have to reflect the goals and objectives of the organization in our strategy. For example, one of Camosun's strategies is to be very student focused. And so sometimes or one of our goals, and so our strategy has to kind of reflect that, doesn't it? So we would tend to do things that would benefit students. We wouldn't, try to give the lowest cost option, but instead maybe try to provide something a little bit different if that was our goal. All right. And so that's going to have an impact on the types of information systems that we pick. All right. The systems that we put in place at the college should reflect the goals that we have. So if our goal is excellent student service, we shouldn't try to save money on our registration system. We should buy the best one out there. So our strategy is going to be influenced by the industry we're in. So if you think about Camosun, we're in the education industry. We've got UVic in town. We've got Royal Roads University. We've got a number of sort of private offerings. And then we've also got all of the online offerings that are available to people too. And so depending on what they're doing, that's going to have a little bit of an impact on the type of strategy we pick. For example, if everyone else is focused on providing a top-notch education, even though the tuition's fairly high, maybe there's an opportunity for someone to come in and provide a low-cost option. On the other hand, if everyone's doing a low-cost option, maybe there's an opportunity for someone to come in and provide a high-quality education. Similarly, what if all the schools that we compete with are general schools that offer lots of different programs and options for people? Well, maybe we could make a name for ourselves by focusing only on one specific thing, perhaps business, and not doing any of the other things. So there's different ways that we can pick a strategy depending on what's happening in our industry as well. Now, like we've done before, we often like models to help explain and analyze things. And we've seen Porter's value chain already. Another model that Michael Porter came up with is called Porter's 5 Forces model. And that basically says, look, if we're going to analyze the industry, and that's what this one is for, this is for analyzing an industry, we're going to look at a bunch of different things. A rivalry amongst existing firms, kind of like we just talked about. The threat of new entrants coming in. So is it possible for a new player to come and join the industry? Or is it the type of industry where that doesn't happen? Think about education. Well, I guess we could get a new small school coming in, right? But if we look at some industries like automaking, well, it's hard to join, so the threat of new entrants may be smaller. All right. So that's another force. That's our second force that we could look at. We can also look at substitutes. Is there much of a threat of substitution? Let's imagine that I'm in luxury car sales. Well, some people might be just as happy, instead of buying a high-end sports car, to buy a yacht. That might show off their success just as well for them. So a substitute in that industry could be yachts. So that's got nothing to do with cars, but it does threaten the car industry. Similarly, if I'm in the business of providing cheap, low-cost cars for transportation, well, then I might have a substitute of bicycles or electric bikes, e-bikes coming along that impact my business. So we sometimes look outside of our industry for substitutes. And then going on the horizontal, we've got two similar forces, suppliers and customers. Suppliers provide things to us, and we have to look at how much power they have. If there's only one or two sources of supply, you're really kind of beholden to or um, overpowered by your suppliers, aren't you? Because if they cut you off, you're in trouble. On the other hand, if you're able to find lots of suppliers, well, you've got more power over them. Similarly, on the customer side, but now we're the supplier to them. If we've got lots of customers, we've got more power. Whereas if we only have one or two customers, we could be in real trouble if they leave. So think about the college. They've got thousands of students. If one of them is mad and decides they don't like Camosun anymore and they decide to leave, well, it may not hurt Camosun a whole lot. But if I'm a small contracting company doing work for the government and I only have 3 large government contracts keeping me going, and they shut down one of those, that's going to have a huge impact on my business. All right? So we have to think about customers as well. One of the interesting things that we can do with this is also think about where technology could play a role. So can I use technology maybe in this dimension here to influence the power of customers? Sure, maybe I can reach more customers than ever before or find out information about my customers to help keep them a little less powerful. Maybe I can also use technology to lock them in so they don't want to leave. One great example of that would be the Starbucks app. It gives me stars for buying and shopping at Starbucks. Well, I'm more likely to go back to Starbucks again, aren't I? So that's just a great little piece of technology on the customer side that helps lock them in and give Starbucks a little more power in the customer relationship. All right. Similarly, if we go over now and think about the supplier dimension, well, we could use technology to find new sources of supply and connect with those people so that we're not reliant on just one or two. That would be an obvious example where we could use it there. Some companies use technology to connect directly with their suppliers so that it's almost like they work within your company. You can exchange information and designs and specifications and all kinds of great data like that back and forth. That's going to be of benefit as well. Walmart uses technology with their suppliers to lock them in. Suppliers have to buy into the systems Walmart use if they want to supply to them. Well, that makes it less likely those suppliers are going to want to leave because they've invested so much money in becoming a supplier to Walmart. It gives Walmart a lot of power. On the new vendor side, there's some innovative things there. One example might be a store like the Running Room. They provide running shoes, but they were very clever in setting up an online system for members of the Running Room to come in and have all kinds of access to great free tools to help with their shopping and also monitoring their races and progress and things like that. That's all done through technology by creating an online system for them. And it makes it a little harder for new vendors to come in because they're not only going to have to find the shoes, they're also going to have to replicate all of the systems that make things kind of nice. Now, would that same strategy also help bargaining power with customers? Sure. That's going to help there too, isn't it? So IT in that case has played a couple of great roles there for us. Threat of substitutions? Well, sometimes the systems we use there are just ones to help us stay aware of what customers are looking at. So what does a customer really want? Because if we're aware of that, maybe we can reduce that threat. So if I was selling luxury automobiles and I thought people were buying cars from me, I might not be aware that really what they're buying is a chance to show off and have a little bit of kind of bragging power, right? They say, oh, they've got a luxury item. So without that awareness of my customers, I might miss the fact that when a new yacht company opened in town, that might impact my business. All right, so lots of different ways we could think about that. And this model kind of gives us a little bit of a framework to help talk about that. Is it perfect? Well, probably not. But it, like all models, it's a starting point and it gives us a little bit of good advice, right, or good thinking coming out of it. Here's a different version that I actually made up. I thought was a little bit more clear maybe. So if we think about the threat of new entrants, is it expensive to enter this type of business? Do you have to have any specialist knowledge? Economies of scale? That means is it hard to just produce a few units? You know, that might be something like automobiles. It gets much cheaper when you're producing thousands of them. On the customer power, how many customers are there? How big is each order? Are they sensitive to price? You know, can they substitute to a new company easily? Is there a switching cost for them to do that? Those are the types of things we might see in there. Threat of substitution, are there any substitutes and can they switch? Is there a cost to that? That's another one. And then on the supplier power, how many suppliers, how big are they? What's our ability to leave them? And what are the costs for doing so? And in the center, the very first force we looked at, how many competitors are we dealing with? Is there a difference between us? Are customers loyal to one group versus another? Is there a switching cost? Think about the industry of education. Once you're halfway through your program, there's a bit of a switching cost to you if you want to switch and join another institution. They may not take all of your transfer credits. And so you tend to be a little bit locked in. There's a cost for you there. You may tend to be loyal to your college that way. All right. So those are just some points that fit within each one. I hope that helps you out a little bit. I've also uploaded just a blank one for you, and I'm going to use it now to go through and think about the coffee industry in Victoria. So if we were to analyze this, let me show you what we might do. All right. Is there a threat of any new entrants, right? Is it easy to enter? And it is actually fairly easy to enter the marketplace, isn't it? Think about how many small coffee shops there are in Victoria. Seems anyone can open a coffee shop if they want. They just need to rent a little space, buy a little bit of equipment, hire a few teenagers and call them baristas, and they're up and running, right? And if you have some funky angle to it, even better. So it's not that hard to get into the coffee business. So there is a threat there, isn't there? In the center, maybe I should have started with this, competitive rivalry. Is there much competition? And there is. There's lots of competition. Seems like every corner there's another coffee shop. Sometimes you'll see a Starbucks right across from another Starbucks. There's competition everywhere in the coffee industry. So there's lots of competitive rivalry. Okay. And how do different players compete? Well, often it's on trying to make a different experience, isn't it? Be a little bit different for the customer. We can talk more about that later, but that might be one way we could deal with that. Customer power, pretty low. Somebody doesn't like my coffee, I might give them another one or remake it, but I'm probably not going to, phone them up several times and visit them to try to woo them back. They can go find a new coffee shop. I've got lots of customers. Supplier power. It's actually fairly low as well. There's lots of sources of supply. I guess if we thought about, maybe organic beans or specialty beans, maybe that would be a little bit different. Their suppliers might have a little more power over us, but let's think about the suppliers in the coffee industry. If we work backward through the value chain, are they getting rich? No, not really. The farmers are barely making it in some of these countries where coffee beans come from. It's the big players like Starbucks that are getting rich, isn't it? And so supplier power is fairly low. What about threats of substitution? Are there any substitutes for coffee? Sure. What about tea? Tea shops, right? They're popular. You can go get tea. What about other types of drinks, right? So maybe there's other types of beverages people will go to instead. What about making it at home? Well, we saw things like Keurig and Tassimo and little products like that coming out where you could make fairly fancy coffees at home for yourself, right? You can make a nice little latte, no problem. And on the low end side as well, we have other chains like McDonald's coming in, and they've been coming in with a bit of a substitute because it's just plain coffee, isn't it? But now they've entered into specialty coffees as well, so they sort of been in both those spaces, haven't they? The competitive rivalry and substitutes there. One interesting thing about the coffee industry is it is location based, isn't it? So having a good location is important. And in fact, if you go down to a lot of office buildings, where do people go? Well, the coffee shop down on the first floor, right? That tends to be the one they go to, or one next door, that sort of thing. So industry analysis is kind of interesting for the Victoria coffee industry. It might be different in Vancouver, for example, or in another part of the world. We might find a few small differences, but that might give us a sense now if we were going to open our own coffee shop of where we might fit in. So it is easy to enter. That's good news for us if we want to open a coffee shop. Customers don't have a lot of power, neither do suppliers, so that's fine. But there's lots of competition. And there's competition on price, and there's competition on type of drink as well, isn't there? So there's price competition. That would be more the McDonald's side. And there's sort of the price on our competition on the value proposition, i.e., you can only get a Frappuccino one place, right? That sort of thing. Or an ice cap or something like that only comes from Tim Hortons. And so there is some competition there on the value. All right. So what would we do then if we wanted to enter this market? Well, we got to think about our own strategy for coming in. Right? Porter said there's 4 ways to compete. We can compete on a cost basis by either being the lowest cost in the whole industry or maybe just within a certain segment of the industry. Okay. So I can open a shop that just offers cheaper drinks but offers the same drinks as everyone else but just cheaper. Or I could open a shop, that would be the first one. Or I could open a shop that said, look, I'm only going to sell good old-fashioned cup of joe coffee. You can come in and get a coffee. You want it fancy, put some cream and sugar in it. That's all you get, but it's cheap. It's 80 cents a cup. No problem. I could do something like that. Or I could say, look, I want to be different than everyone else. All right. So I got to create a better product. So I'm going to have the finest Italian coffees, maybe something like that, and a whole range of them from just a regular Americano up to cappuccinos and lattes and you name it, right? Espressos, the whole range, but every drink is going to be the finest. Or I could say, look, I'm only going to focus in on lattes. I'm going to become a latte expert. A latte expert. And if you want a latte, this will be the one place in town to come, but don't come for anything else. I don't have it. This is it. So that's the different 4 strategies. And we could, by looking at the Victoria one, we could think about, well, what's our best opportunity? Probably over on this side. We're not going to compete with McDonald's on price, are we? And we've seen them come in, first just offering basic coffee quite inexpensively, and then offering a full range of coffee. So they sort of moved here up to here, and they've got that covered, right? And Tim Hortons, they've got some pretty inexpensive offerings as well, which are pretty good, that sort of thing. So that's maybe covered, but as a small player, I could say, look, I'm going to be different. Can I be different in everything? Well, maybe. And I could have a store that really did that. I could work on trying to provide the finest of all types of coffee drinks. Or I could say I'm just going to focus in on one particular latte. If my name was Larry, I could say I'm going to open up Latte Larry's, right? And that would be it. And so that might be where I would focus my attention given this competitive strategy we just did. Well, we can look at current players in the industry as well. What should Starbucks do next? They've wrestled with that over time, haven't they? They started out by being different, and then they also tried to compete a little bit on cost, and they've had some ups and downs, and they lost some business for a while. And then they really, again, tried to focus in on being a little bit different, didn't they? And offering things that other players don't offer. And they've done pretty well. So, they can use this type of model as well. Can we think about technology in here too? Absolutely. Let's see, if I want to be different, one way to do that is to really impress the customer. What kinds of things can I use technology for to do with that? Well, I could offer free Wi-Fi in my store. although everyone's doing that now, so it's been replicated. I could offer an app that kept track of what they ordered so that it would make it easy to order their specialty coffee the next time. And if my app had lots of customization features, even better, that would be nice. So I could do all kinds of things like that to make it a little bit better and use technology to fit in. If I wanted to keep costs down, and I could use technology to get in there and help run my stores very efficiently. Right? Starbucks has done that too. Okay, so lots of different ways as we get into it, we can think about IT playing a role in this too. Well, what about innovation? IT doesn't stand still, does it? And so all the things we just talked about, we have to keep in mind that things are going to change as well. It's a moving target in a sense. The industry structure can change because of innovation. Think about the music industry. It's not that many years ago that people bought record albums, and then it switched to CDs, and then it switched to downloading MP3s, and now it's switched again to streaming services. So that industry continues to change through innovation. Okay? And basically, we've got two types of technology innovations we want to think about. Sustaining ones are changes that kind of maintain the rate of improvement for customers over time. So maybe, we think about storage technology. Storage technology for computers, well, it keeps getting better slowly all the time and just continually improves and gives people more value. So you can buy a 1 terabyte hard drive now, whereas a few years ago, you might buy a 500 gigabyte, and a few years before that, you might have been happy with a 100 gigabyte. It's just slowly improved, hasn't it, over time? Disruptive technologies, they're the ones that have a really new, different way of doing things, right? And so one technology that disrupted everything when I was a young person was the internet. Now, it may be hard for you to imagine, but try to put yourself in my shoes when I was younger, and there was a time when there was no internet. There was no way to universally connect and communicate and share data and information with people. We could phone people, there were telephones, and we could send them documents, and we even had fax machines. But there was nothing like the internet. That came along and changed business totally. We had the free flow of information and data. We could exchange with each other, and it disrupted pretty much every industry you can think of. All right, totally changed every industry. That's a disruptive technology. All right. How does innovation kind of get out there in a sense? Like, we see different innovations. They may be mobile technology or 5G or things like that. Well, Rogers says there's sort of a path that it takes when it first becomes knowledge for people to when they confirmed or when they actually implement it and decide they like it. And so first people are aware of it, right? That's the knowledge level. And then there's maybe persuaded to take that on. So I guess let's look at mobile technology like tablets and like iPads and that kind of thing. A few years ago they came out and people were aware of them. And then they started to see others use them, and they started to become persuaded. And then they thought, yeah, we could use them too, and they made the decision to go ahead and get them for their staff. And then they implemented it. Maybe they gave everyone on the sales force an iPad and the right software to go with it. And then they monitored it for a while to confirm whether it was a good thing or not. So those would be the 5 steps that we go through from first being aware of a new innovation to actually adopting it and confirming that it's something we want to keep. Now, we could drop out at any one of those steps as well, couldn't we? But that's sort of how it goes. And we can think of any new technology coming along like augmented reality. Lots of businesses are aware of it. Some have been persuaded to maybe give it a go a little bit, right? And so they've made that decision and implemented it. I know that IKEA, for example, has got a few apps where you can do some augmented reality and load furniture into your living room and see how it looks and that kind of thing. Will they keep it? Well, I think it depends a little bit on the feedback. So I would say IKEA is kind of right at this stage now, aren't they? So they've done the implementation. They're waiting for the confirmation. All right. So any new technology that comes along is likely going to follow a pattern similar to that. So how do systems provide a competitive advantage? Well, we look back to the 5 forces, right? And one way to think about it is we can put those into a list of principles, and that's what they've done in the book. They call them principles that we can use and apply those to our company, but also our personal competitive advantage. And so let's have a look at what they give us in the book. They say, look, on the product implementation side, you can create a new product or service. You can enhance a product or a service, or you can make your product or service different. So maybe technology allows me to come up with a completely new way of delivering Biz 241. All right, I've invented some technology where all you have to do is wear this special headset, and within 3 or 4 hours, I will download the entire course into your brain. That's a new product or service. Maybe I can just enhance an existing one. So I can use technologies like D2L and others to improve the service I provide to students. Or maybe I make my product different than others. All right. So maybe I use technology to connect and communicate with industry players so that my students have a chance to reach out and do a little bit of live work experience while they're taking the course. I could make that possible by using different communication technologies. So there's one, or there's sort of the first category. I mean, the other is more on the system implementation side. Can I use technology to lock in customers, right, like Starbucks does with their app? Can I lock in suppliers like Walmart does with its suppliers? Can I raise barriers to market entry by making it more difficult to join in? Maybe we set it up so now the industry is really based on accessing some very expensive technology, software, and hardware, and until you've bought into that, you can't become a big player. All right? The auto industry, by the way, uses a lot of great software that all the auto industry makers use to deal with their supply chains, and you're going to have to buy what's necessary to join that if you want to enter the market. We can establish alliances. We can go out to suppliers, to other companies, other groups out there, and build alliances. That may be helpful as well. And then, of course, we can always use technology to become more efficient and reduce costs. And pretty much everywhere you go, you'll see that in place where we try to make things a little bit cheaper. All right. So that's the two sort of areas with the different principles, they call them in the book, for dealing with information systems. Okay. How do we sustain competitive advantage? That's another tricky question. Let's say I put in some great new teaching technology and it works really well. Well, why doesn't UVic just have a look at what I did and copy it? Or Railroads or some other college. What's to stop them from doing that? All right. Because technology is very ubiquitous. We've talked about that before. And so is it even possible to sort of keep maintaining a competitive advantage, or will people just copy everything we do that's new? Right? It's really hard to have any particular technology that only you own. It seems to be out there for everyone. All right. What we found, though, is a way to work around this. It's true they can copy the technology, but it's not true that they could copy the procedures that we have in our organization and the people along with the hardware and software. So another company may go and adopt the exact same D2L that we use at Camosun, but if their instructors aren't trained on how to use it, then it's not going to give them the same advantage. All right, so that's the thing. It's the people side that make the difference. And we said that at different times throughout this course, but it really is true. It's the people and procedures. Think about that 5-component step. We had the hardware, the software, the data, and then we had the procedures and the people. That's really where it's at, isn't it? The procedures and the people. If we can maintain an advantage in that area, it's going to be much more difficult to duplicate. In business, people make the difference. All right, so keep that in mind all the way through the course. That's pretty important for us. So companies have to find a distinctive way to compete. They have to integrate the technology they need along with the people and procedures. So that's a key thing that's easy to slip by. It's that integration right there that's really important. If we can't integrate our technology and our people together in an effective way, we're out of luck, aren't we? All right. So that's really key. That's really what a lot of this course is about, to be honest. All right. So competitors can buy the technology, but it's going to take a lot of time and resources for people to gain the same level that they might have in our place. All right. So matching all of that can be a really high barrier to entry too for companies with less experience and success in the field. So if a new college started up tomorrow and hired a whole pile of young instructors, it would be a challenge for them to replicate what a more experienced college had in place, wouldn't it? All right, so that's the idea. So sustaining competitive advantage is possible as long as we focus on our people and procedures and how well we integrate them with our technology. That's it for chapter 3. I'd like you to go ahead and finish reading it up if you haven't already. Make some notes in there. Then go and complete the chapter simulation on our MyLab site. I've got a new exercise for you where I'm going to get you to get in and analyze the energy drink industry. And then we've got a quiz for you this week as well. All right, I hope that helped, and I'll talk to you soon.